Today, we're looking at backlog refinement. This is the ceremony that quietly keeps Scrum teams sane. If you think of sprint planning as the performance, backlog refinement is the rehearsal, and it allows us to remove ambiguity, highlight any risks, and drive forward into a sprint with clarity. Hi guys, it's Dave here. Welcome back to Project Management 101. It's great to see you. Today we're diving into the backlog refinement ceremony, which is the final of our ceremonies within our Scrum Foundation series. So make sure you smash that like button if you get some value out of today's video, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future uploads where we continue to explore the world of project management, whether that's from an Agile angle, a waterfall Agile, or somewhere in between. So starting off, what is backlog refinement? I think this is a great place to start because it'll allow us to set our scene in our minds and think about the way that we bring it to life for our teams. For me, backlog refinement is a working session with all of the team, including the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the development team, where we come together to validate the requirements of any user stories that are in the backlog. We review the upcoming work. We break down any user stories if they need breaking down. Think of that 1 to 2 day rule that we talked about when we were talking about sprint planning. And then we size them using the appropriate metrics within the team's agreed measurement approach. And the goal for this ceremony is simple: make the next sprint easier, but equally it allows us to keep our backlog refined, groomed and clear. I think there's some key points of note in particular for this. This is an ongoing thing. It should happen regularly, not as a one-off. Maybe weekly, if not certainly every sprint, the team should come together to undertake this activity. And it's team-led. It might be facilitated by the Scrum Master and the product owner, but it's team-led. It's about getting to tangibility around what we're asking and therefore what we need to engineer. I think in particular, it focuses on clarity, not commitment. So this isn't about the team committing to deliver work. It's about clarity of the tickets in the backlog. So when they go into sprint planning, they can be clear and then make a commitment based on the clarity that they've gained. In contrast, let's think about what backlog refinement is not. It's not sprint planning. It's not a design workshop. It's not a forum to debate product strategy. This is a forum for the team to come together and understand work requirements. Nothing more, nothing less. So if you feel like you're stepping outside of those boundaries when you're facilitating or you're observing a product owner facilitating that, don't be shy. Step in, remind everybody what's the purpose of the backlog refinement ceremony. Let's touch on why refinement matters. When it's done well, planning is calm and predictable, and I'm talking about the sprint planning ceremony. However, if refinement's poor and done to a low quality, it drives chaos within the Scrum team. They walk into planning without clarity, unable to really meet the goal of sprint planning within the allocated time. And it also drives overestimation, unconfidence, and drives a real sense of kind of negativity into the Scrum team. And that's why taking the time out to do the work outside of the room, as I'd describe it, right, is really important. And this, for me, is why refinement matters. How I like to say it is refinement reduces surprises, and surprises are generally expensive. So I've already mentioned this, but just for ultimate clarity, who should be involved in refinement? For me, refinement's a team sport. Everybody's involved. So we need the product owner or product manager, whoever you're working with, the Scrum team, so the development team, and the Scrum Master. That group coming together has a shared understanding of all of the different nuances of delivering work within your organisation. So make sure you've got the right people in the room, and don't do it if you don't. Not having the product owner there is going to make for a very unsuccessful session. As a facilitator, think of it like this. If only one person is talking within refinement, that's not collaboration, that's not shared understanding, that's a monologue. Let's walk through the behaviours of a healthy backlog refinement session. The stories are read aloud by the product owner, and the team have the ability to ask questions and do ask questions. As a Scrum Master, we should make sure that we're observing this and check in with people. Are we clear on this? Are there any questions? Have we documented it to the right level of detail? and drive the engagement to support the product owner. It can be a lonely sport in these sort of forums, so it's really important that we keep the energy high. And the Scrum Master, obviously we're a delivery channel, we're part of that. So even if the product owner's doing the reading, we're chipping in, we're helping. Right, come on guys, let's get into it. Keep it dynamic, keep it upbeat, and keep it full of energy. So we're reading the stories out loud, the team are engaged, we're having a great conversation, we're validating and checking as we go. Whilst we're doing it, we're going to start asking questions around acceptance criteria. What do we need to define as acceptance criteria for this ticket so we're clear that we can move it to done at the end? What is an acceptable state for this ticket? And that's really important. So if it's not on the ticket whilst you're discussing it, add it. Make sure it's clear and make sure it's tangible. Additionally, we want to highlight any dependencies, so we're surfacing them early. So that could be on another Scrum team, it could be somewhere else in the organisation, and the Scrum Master can help cut through that and make sure that we've got commitment to support. Another thing we should be doing is breaking down stories if they're too large. If it's exceeding the 1 to 2 day rule, i.e. to be able to have demonstrable progress within sprint planning and within sprint execution, you need to break it down smaller, so when you're estimating it, it becomes a much smaller thing, much more tangible, much more likely to be committed to and delivered. So once we're there, the next part of this is for the team to size the word. So you might use planning poker for this, or you might just have a good understanding as a group, maybe use t-shirt sizes. Whatever works for your team, make sure you're capturing the size of the work on the ticket, because as you go into sprint planning, it makes that cut-off rule, knowing your velocity and capacity versus the actual throughput of the team, and where you can cut off based on the backlog. It allows that conversation to be much more focused, much more quickly. And I think finally, another great thing that should be happening in refinement is the product owner continually assessing the backlog's priority. And I'm not saying doing that on the fly, but within the discussion, it should be dynamic. If we recognise that we've got a technical prerequisite before we can deliver a piece of product work, the backlog should be reprioritised so that technical piece of work is done first. It's more important and it's part of the kind of critical path for delivery. Of course it should be done first. So make sure you watch out for nuances like that, because I've watched them bite teams many times. I think as a Scrum Master and as the full Scrum team, the job here isn't to have all of the answers, it's to create a forum and facilitate a group discussion where we drive the clarity together. On the flip side, a bad version of refinement can look like this. We're only just talking about a story now. Nobody had any idea it was on the backlog or it was a thing. There are exceptional circumstances where that might be the case. There's an emergency change required across the entire kind of department or whatever it is. Things do happen, so don't be surprised, and you don't need to be too precious about it. But on the whole, most people should have a longer term view of the backlog, and as you get into the refinement session more regularly, it allows you to keep that kind of drumbeat of what's in the backlog and what's the direction that we're going for the product that we're delivering. So a bad version could be you've never seen it before. Another point could be no one's asking questions. Everybody's kind of disengaged. They're just sat there kind of staring like, yeah, great, whatever. Additionally, maybe work's being sized without fully understanding it. And maybe the team walks out more confused than when they arrived for the meeting in the first place. Or maybe the meeting becomes a design and a product direction rabbit hole. These things are going to drive the team nuts. You're going to waste a load of time in the sprint, and it's not going to be productive and allow you to walk into a great sprint planning session. And don't forget why we want to do refinement. It's about making sprint planning easy. Here's a really simple, easy, repeatable framework, and I will document it on the screen. Grab a screen grab, because it just makes it so simple. You can take this away, use it with your Scrum teams, and it will just make this really easy. So we'll just work through point by point. Start at the top of the backlog, always. Read the story and clarify with any questions, and make sure you're pulling in the team to ask questions as we talk about the story. Add acceptance criteria as you go. If there isn't any, don't move on to the next ticket until you've got acceptance criteria. Split the ticket if needed from a size perspective, and do it before you move on to the next ticket. Size the story finally, and then reprioritise if needed, as we just talked about. And then the final step, move on to the next ticket. So they're clear, simple, repeatable steps that you can use for every single ticket within Backlog Refinement, and following that flow just keeps a level of order within what could be a chaotic session to make sure you're driving it forward. So if you're the Scrum Master, have a little checklist, and then for each ticket you can just mentally tick off, great, yeah, I've seen that, we're talking about it, we've discussed it, we've asked questions. We've added acceptance criteria. We're talking about the size of it. Great. Okay, do we need to break it down? Yes or no? And then we can just make sure we've got that full kind of circle discussion going before we move on. And doing that drives great backlog health. And it's really, really helpful for the team and for you as a Scrum Master, and also for the product owner as we move forward to our next sprint. So building on that framework and everything that we've talked about so far, how much is too much in terms of refinement within the backlog? As a rule of thumb, I'd say at a Scrum team level, you want to keep 1 to 2 sprints worth of backlog items at a ready state. If you're working in safe, you will have a challenge here because they would like you to have 4 to 6 sprints worth of backlog work refined and ready. So there is a bit of a nuance within this in the wider Agile sphere, particularly in Scrum though, as a rule of thumb, and if you're working in pure Scrum teams, 1 to 2 sprints is the ideal amount. And this just means it gives us enough to keep the team flowing. We've talked about in the backlog lesson, and I'll pop a link in the description just so you guys can go back and watch that if you didn't, the cone of uncertainty. And I think it's really important as we talk about backlog refinement that we take that cone of uncertainty kind of approach, and therefore the things that are closest to us are the most well defined. So you might get into that kind of rhythm, 1 to 2 sprints of ready state of your stories. Maybe 3 to 4 sprints out, you've got a good understanding those things are coming up, and they'll start to come to the top of the backlog and be refined as we go into next week's refinement session, for example. As a rule of thumb, too much refinement is waste, but too little is chaos. So striking the balance in between is really important. As a Scrum Master, we can observe that, and we can help to coach the product owner and work with the development team to strike the balance and get the right level refined. Backlog refinement isn't glamorous, but it's one of the quiet levers that you have as a Scrum Master and also as a product owner in the background that's driving culture and clarity into high-performing teams. So don't treat it as an afterthought, treat it as a strategic direction. Do you do something differently in your sprint refinement that you want to share with the group? Drop a comment below. Let's continue to share with the community. I'm really passionate about it and I'd love to hear from you. Make sure you smash the like button if you got some value out of today's video, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. We'll continue to cover great topics in Scrum, Agile, Hybrid, Waterfall, covering all different parts of the project management, Scrum Master, Agile delivery lead discipline. I'm Dave. Thanks for watching Project Management 101. I can't wait to see each and every one of you next week. From chaos to clarity, take care.